Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 11 of the Above and Below podcast. I am the co-host and co-creator, Cam Ayala. I am the Above and Below. My co-host, James Dixon, aka Superman is for real, is not able to join us today, but he is here in spirit. So, little side note here for all the listeners and viewers. This is actually part 2 with my boy Nick here, because last time we spoke last week, for whatever reason, the technology gods of Zoom decided to not save the recording. So hopefully everything goes as smoothly as possible today. So we're just going to hop right into it. And I'm going to tell you all just high level how I met Nick. And then we're going to give him an opportunity to share his story of how he became an amputee. And then share with you guys a little collaboration that he and I did, and have him kind of tell you all a little bit about his process and his gift. So I guess it was about 5 or 6 months ago, I was perusing Instagram per usual. And like a lot of people with limb loss or limb difference, you'll follow certain accounts or even certain hashtags like amputee, amputation, prosthetics, etc. And I came across this one gentleman's Instagram, Alex One Leg, and he had this super cool prosthetic unlike anything I had ever seen. And I'm like, okay, that's not one of the major manufacturers that I'm used to. But come to find out, it was actually just a cover that went over his above-knee microprocessor prosthetic. And it was all custom by Nick, who is also known on Instagram as Prosthetic Guy. And immediately I'm like, okay, this guy is super talented. But I didn't even know that he was an amputee himself, which gives him that much more street cred in my book. So I reached out to him, and we'll go into that a little bit more later on in this conversation about the collaboration that we worked on. But most importantly, like we do here in Above and Below, we want to give this platform for the individuals with limb loss or limb difference a chance to share their story, give some inspiration, some hope, and then close with some encouragement for everybody in the community. So without further ado, Nick, take it away, man. Tell us, a little bit about your story, how you became an amputee, and, we'll kind of have some questions as we go along here.
Right on. Thank you for having me, man. It's an honor and privilege to get to talk. You guys, everybody. But so I had cancer at age 13, osteosarcoma. I think I was diagnosed in February, so right at the beginning of the year. And with that comes its own set of, challenges and the battle within the battle, you know what I mean? Because there's always stuff going wrong, like your port going sideways or infections. And so after a few months and a few rounds of chemotherapy, they did a total knee replacement on me. A couple months later, that got infected, had to come out. I spent 3 months with just a straight rod while they fed me antibiotics, got rid of the infection. Second total knee replacement, that one was A-OK. My last chemotherapy was on my 14th birthday, or I should say canceled on my 14th birthday. I got the clean bill of health. And then I had a pretty normal life for a few years. I lost a lot of friends along the way, because you get these groups of other kids that are going through anything from cancer, muscular dystrophy, muscular sclerosis, I mean, just you name it.
Yeah.
Cystic fibrosis was a big one with the group down in Detroit. There was a lot of kids with cystic fibrosis, but yeah, I kind of ended up with some survivor's guilt there for a while, because you get a batch of sick kids and then you end up making it relatively unscathed by my perspective. But I always kind of had the benefit of knowing where I was in the timeline of things. Like, God willing, I was going to live a long life, and 13, even though, yeah, this sucks right now. Like, dude, every comic book hero's origin always started with some adversity. So I always kind of looked at it like, no, dude, this is an opportunity to level up. This ain't bad at all. This is a good thing.
Well, real quick, Nick, not to cut you off there, because one thing that's been interesting, every single guest that we've had on this podcast is someone with limb loss or limb difference, and we all have our own unique stories, but there's also, like, interestingly enough, a lot of commonalities between all of us in some degree. Like, the fact that you were diagnosed with cancer at such a young age, and then you had to undergo a total knee replacement. I had to undergo a total knee replacement, which got infected and led to my amputation. But I'm curious, and James went through this too. At age 11 was when he lost his leg, and age 11 was when I was diagnosed with lymphedema, which led to my amputation. But you were 13 when you were diagnosed with cancer, and you just said something interesting about how every superhero's kind of origin story starts with some sort of tragedy or hardship that they have to overcome. When you were age 13, did you already kind of have that mentality or that faith that everything was going to be okay? Or is that something your parents really embedded in you as you were going through that journey?
At first, and I mean, at very first, there was actually my very first reaction was, so no school, right? Like I don't have to keep doing this and that. But beyond that, and I'm dead serious, that was my legitimate reaction. I come from very pragmatic people, so it just become this is what we have to deal with now. And after a few weeks, and I mean weeks, that was the new routine. We go to chemo, we come back. I spend a few weeks in ICU getting blood transfusions and being isolated and kind of getting my body back to go take another round of chemotherapy. Mine was pretty aggressive. It was 24 hours a day. It started on Monday and then I'd get off it on Friday or Saturday. So it was 5 days straight, 24 hours. But I did always kind of have that. Even like before I got sick, I had an older brother that always pushed me. You know how that is if you've got a brother out there. And it's like we were always training each other for some CIA competition that we were never going to have to go through. But it paid dividends for me growing up thinking I was going to be a Ninja Turtle or, some kind of comic book hero, because as soon as I was faced with adversity, it was just like, yeah, no, this is literally going to be fine. This is no big deal. There's only two ways this can go. I know I had the luxury of wisdom at that age to just know when you see older people that were sick when they were younger, there's really only two types. And I knew I wasn't going to be the other type. So I don't want to say I wasn't worried about it. I was never worried about dying or being sick. I was just looked at it as like, this might be the most traumatic day for me, but it's Tuesday to the people taking care of me. Like this is what they do. And I took a lot of just comfort in knowing that, something that might be a big deal to me is literally not a big deal to somebody out there.
Wow.
So
What a mature perspective for a 13-year-old. And I guess when you go through something that traumatic at that young of an age, you're kind of expediting your youth and you're kind of forced to grow up because you're dealing with things that 90% of most youth will never have to go through. So one question about osteosarcoma, because when I don't know a whole lot about it, so forgive my ignorance, and maybe you know the answer to this. So what I've seen just from seeing things on social media and being in the medical center here in Houston, that what would you say is the percentage, if you had to just ballpark it, of osteosarcoma patients who have to end up undergoing an amputation? I feel like it's pretty high.
And I'm gonna preface this with I'm not a surgeon, I'm not a doctor, I got
Yep.
nothing. I literally think it's 100%.
Really? Okay. I knew it was high. I knew it was like
I
over
think ultimately
60%.
everybody. I do know a few people. Great, 10% back. I do know a few people though that were given cadaver bones, and I know one lady here in Michigan that had exactly what I had at almost exactly the same time, and she still got two fully biological legs. Just got married, living a good life. So it all comes down to your resources, actually, too. I hate to say that, but she had really good resources.
Yeah, that's a sad reality of medicine. Even with good insurance, right? Some people get to cut the line, so to speak. So take us now to the point, Nick, where you've undergone your second total knee replacement. You've gone a couple years without really any, I guess, major complications per se. So basically, where I'm getting at, take us to the point where you're at a certain age where you're knowing that you're going to have to go through the amputation. What was that journey like?
I mean, they did a good job of always preparing me for, hey, one day you're probably going to have your leg amputated. So it was just always rattling around. One day I have to get this cut off. So I kind of did my best to take care of it and prolong the life of it. But it was in bad shape for a long time, just as far as the concrete, everything that held it in place. I could feel it rattling around in there. I couldn't, after 5 years of physical therapy, I gained like no muscle mass. Like the use just never got there.
Yeah.
But when I was 27 years old, I went to wake up. I woke up one morning and I went to walk out of bed and I just fell to the floor, went to take another step and I just went right to the ground. And I knew, I'm like, I can't feel anything and it's not responding to my commands anymore. So when one of my employees showed up to work that day, I had him taken to the emergency room and dropped me off. And I literally hopped up to the emergency room desk and said, "Hi, I need to get my leg cut off today." And they just sort of like, "What?" I'm like, "No, I'm kind of serious. Like, it's not awesome. Probably time to go. Past its prime." And they spent a week feeding me antibiotics and threw everything at it, trying to save it. But you know how osteomyelitis and things like that are. I don't remember the other one. There was,
Well, that's what I
some
had.
bad
I had
outcomes.
osteomyelitis also, and that's kind of what led to my amputation. And what's interesting too, Nick, just another common denominator that I just thought of here between you, me, and James is that at one point we've all had leg length discrepancies, right? And so
4 inches, baby.
4 inches, yeah, I know James was a couple inches. Mine at one point I think was about 2 inches. So that's kind of another interesting common thread that we have. So that's, yours was not necessarily elective per se. It was definitely medically necessary, but you weren't a victim of some sort of, traumatic accident like a veteran or a car crash like we've had some of our past guests. So
Oh, thank
talk
God.
us,
I
yeah,
feel for those guys.
talk us through then, Nick, when you're at the point of amputation, what was going through your brain and like maybe some of the preconceived notions that you had about either how easy it was going to be or how hard it was going to be, because a lot of our viewers are people who are about to undergo amputation or may have just experienced that. So if you could recall that time when you're about to have your leg amputated, what that process was like for you.
Um, at that point, I had literally just reshuffled my life. So my priorities were I got to make sure I stay on top of my work contracts because I was self-employed at the time. So I was just kind of had that Jesse Ventura and Predator mentality. Like, I ain't got time to bleed. Man, bring me my laptop. I got stuff to do. Let's get this over with. But I was also anxious to kind of start that next phase of my life where I wasn't going to have any more implants or foreign elements in my body, and I was going to be 100% like organic human again, which is weird to say now because I feel more organic with this, but whatever. It's
Yeah,
not inside of me. It's not a foreign element.
right.
So I was excited to do that, man, but naive, for sure naive. Thought it was going to be a lot easier. Thought because I was 27, young and healthy, I was going to just get up and it'd be like riding a bike. I didn't realize that it's like learning a new language. No, it's not even like learning a new language. It's like teaching a new language to an inanimate object. All right. You think you're going to
Teaching,
put
you
on
said
your
it's like
leg.
teaching, you said it's like teaching a new language to an inanimate object. That's interesting because I've done a lot of physical therapy since my amputation and obviously speak with my prosthetist pretty regularly, but I have never heard it described that way. But I think that's actually really accurate the first time or even still to this day, as you're getting used to your prosthetic, is it's like teaching an inanimate object a new language. So yeah, talk a little bit more about that, how that's been for you.
Well, I went on a deep dive and I learned that essentially I had to build new neural pathways. Um, I couldn't use the old ones anymore. They were dead end roads. I could sit there and keep trying to fight in my quadricep, but it was never going to work. So I'm speaking English to something that's speaking French, and I can't teach it English, so I have to learn French. So
Mm,
that means I doubled down on all the exercises. Whatever the physical therapist gave me, I went home and did it twice as much as what they said. I knew it was going to pay dividends doing all those exercises. So if it's one piece of advice for new amputees, I got it. Well, two. One, wear your shrinker. For the love of
yep.
God,
Yep.
makes everything so much easier. Wear your shrinker. And then two, whatever the physical therapists are giving you for your exercises, know that they're setting the bar as low as they possibly can because they have certain benchmarks they have to have you hit. And just like standardized testing lowers kind of the standard of quality and all that, it's just kind of the same thing. So you know yourself, if you're capable of more, do more.
And that's
But
great
yeah, so I
advice
was hitting it
because,
really hard,
well, I
but I
was
knew
gonna,
I had to build new neural pathways. So I
uh
came up with exercises like finding spots on the floor and then trying to hit my heel, trying to hit my toe on just these points. And then another thing I would do is I would stand up and then not look down and be like, okay, I think my feet are level. And then I would look down and get the visual feedback and be like, oh, wow, I'm way far off my legs. I thought it was underneath me, but I'm way far out there. So I would have like my proprioception where I thought I was at, and then I would reinforce that visually with where I'm actually at. And then you do that a few thousand times and you build new neural pathways, and suddenly your prosthesis is just like a hockey player with a hockey stick. He can manipulate that thing and it's just like dribbling a puck. You
yeah.
become native to it.
Yeah. So you're, from the outside perspective, you seem to be a pretty athletic guy or in good shape, especially for your age.
41, baby.
41, ladies and gentlemen. And so you were 27 years old when you had your leg amputated above the knee, correct?
Correct.
So in that time period from 13 to 27, I mean, that's like a lot of people's like prime athletic years. Were you playing any sports or doing anything with that cement in there?
I couldn't do anything with that leg. I
Okay.
could bend it about 85 degrees. And I could barely move it around. It was so heavy. Um, it was an anchor, man. It was an absolute anchor that I was glad to be rid of. And I felt like when I lost my leg, I actually felt like I was being untethered.
Mm,
Like this ball and chain was being cut from me, and I was going to be able to just fly now. And dude, that was not the case at all, man. A lot of falling, which again, falling's a part of it. Don't be
yep.
afraid to fall. You got to fall. People with two legs fall all the time.
Right.
So, yeah, exactly. A lot of new amputees, well, what if I fall? Yeah, you're gonna tuck and
Yep.
roll. I guess buckle your chin strap, buckle up. I don't know. It's rough.
Yeah. I mean, you can't let the fear of the fall prevent you from trying new sports, new activities. So let's talk about the recovery. So you're 27 years old, you have your leg amputated above the knee.
Mhm.
Take us through that first year of your recovery, because then we're going to transition into what you got into professionally, because that's
Yeah.
another thing that's really fascinating about your story.
So the first year was super frustrating, as most amputees know, because you got all these preconceived notions. You think it's going to be higher tech, and then they come out with this. It just looks like a metal tube with a knee on top, and you're like, so that's it, huh? That's what's going on in prosthetics. And yeah, I mean, yeah. But the first year was super frustrating, and crests and plateaus, and you start making a lot of progress and you start being able to do some things that you couldn't do before, and you're still putting in the work, but then there's just no progress. You don't
Mhm.
see the progress, and then one day you suddenly do something that you couldn't do the year before. And that's the life of an amputee, as long as you're trying, man. And as long as one foot's in front of the other, you're making progress. And so but after, I don't know, 5 or 6 years of being an amputee and being self-employed and trying to provide my own health insurance, um, my current boss now was my prosthetist at the time. He had no idea I was tired of being self-employed and tired of doing Braille. So when he offered me a job, it was very serendipitous, because he thought he was going to have to pull me away from my passion at that time, which was Braille. Um, and it totally was like, dude, I'm kind of hit the end of the road with this anyway. I'm looking for something new. So it's very perfect that you're kind of offering me a job. I don't have to go look for a job, which is just a luxury that I don't take for granted,
Yep.
that I didn't have to apply or anything like that. But he had me coming and doing patient advocacy stuff just as a patient, just to talk to new amputees and stuff. So he was pretty adamant about, dude, we got to get you in the field with some capacity. We have to get you in the field with some capacity. And he settled on just, hey, be a technician. You'll learn how to build the things. I said, I can't even spell technician. And I was making books for a living at that time. You know what I mean? Um, but yeah, so at that time, I literally knew nothing about how a prosthesis was made. So from there, I became a certified technician after working 2 years under the auspices of an authorized entity or an ABC accredited facility. So that was my path towards certification. And then once I started building prosthetics, I learned real quick, like, we have the tools to make anything in this lab. We can build anything.
Yeah.
And I saw a lot of these really cool prosthetics from like Victoria Modesto or the Alternative Limb Project. and I'm trying to find these guys to be like, hey, I'd really like something like that. And it just wasn't happening. You know what I mean? So I went full Thanos and said, fine, I'll build it myself. And then I built a couple for myself. And then I just said, you know what, man, this tastes too good. I got to share this. It's no different than when you're having a plate of food. And even though you might only have a little bit, if something tastes so good that you just have to share it with somebody and be like, here, you got to try this. You got to take a bite of this. That's basically what these cosmetic covers became. It was
Yeah.
something good to keep to myself. And it's like, dude, you gotta get in on it. You gotta find out what it tastes like.
So
Because it
Nick,
completely changed the paradigm
do
in
you
interaction with
remember
other people.
do you remember your first patient that you designed a cover for? And before
Oh,
you say that,
absolutely.
why don't you walk a little bit closer to the camera so people can actually see what we're talking about here? So, ladies and gentlemen, this is like, first off, it is 100% custom. Nick does this basically from scratch. Now, I know some of them he has some kind of basic covers that are pretty, just almost like a blank canvas for him to do all his customization work to. I mean, that looks like a cyborg Terminator leg, and
Sunset here, so we're gonna watch shadows.
there you go. Yeah. And Nick does not do the same leg twice. So any of the ones that you've seen on his Instagram page, they are one of a kind. So tell us why you took that approach, and then ultimately tell us about that first patient.
So the first patient obviously was myself. I was patient 0. I didn't feel like felt like embarrassed. I was like, dude, this isn't something it's not ready. You know what I mean? I'm an amateur. I'm not very good at it yet. It's embarrassed to show like your first painting if you're a fledgling painter. You know what I mean? You really don't want anybody to see it. And then when it's done, all you do is see your own flaws. You just see all the things you'd like to have back. And that's very much still the case with me. When I see things, I'm like, oh, God, I'd love to take that back, hang that open or whatever. But the look on their face during delivery, man, it's like I get high on that. That is my drug of choice anymore, is making somebody love their leg again. Like, dude, you can't describe it.
Yeah.
It's
And I've said this before on previous episodes, one thing that's relatively unique for people with limb loss or limb difference, compared to like the general public of able-bodied people, is when we're little kids and we're taking our first steps. Most of the times we're like, 2 or 3 years old, you don't ever remember that, but you remember the first time you take that first step in your very first prosthesis. And it's one that can be, just overflowing with emotions of excitement. There's still a little bit of the grieving process. I know for a lot of people, myself, I kind of felt that because I just knew that walking was going to be different than what it used to be. And gosh, I'm so blessed to still be able to have that mobility, but you still have to adapt. So tell us a little bit why you kind of went the route instead of like making like a template to where you can get multiple people the same leg versus going the complete handmade 100% custom route.
I don't know, man. People ask me that all the time. Like, it just feels icky. I don't know, man. Like, to make something for somebody for them to love and then just turn around and give the exact same thing to somebody else, like, dude, no. I don't have a real good story for that. It just feels icky.
No, that's what makes you an artist versus a manufacturer. If you're a manufacturer, you can mass produce something, but an artist, everything you do is a unique creation. And that's like all of us. We're all unique individuals.
That's yours.
It's yours.
I made that for you. I'm not gonna make it for something.
And one of the things you told me, Nick, during our very first conversation was, and this is what has stood out to me. You said that with prosthetics, especially if you're wearing shorts and you're out in public, people are going to stare at that prosthetic no matter what. So we might as well give them something cool to stare at. And I just love that. And I think you're not only giving people something cool to look at, you're creating a more inviting conversation piece, right? Because if you have just kind of a generic prosthetic, and I'm not knocking people who do, but like for me, being an extreme extrovert, when I got my first prosthetic leg, I was kind of underwhelmed too. Like, I thought it was going to be cool. And my little niece, she's 2 years old, and she still points and calls it a leg, so she still sees me as a full body person. But kids that are like 5, 6, 7, and a little bit older in their toddler years, they call it a robot leg. Like my best friend, his little 3-year-old son calls it a robot leg. And I just remember thinking, I mean, yeah, I guess, but it would be so much cooler if it actually looked like a robot leg where their imagination can run wild, but then they can still normalize the individual. So, what you're doing, Nick, whether you are aware of this or not, I mean, this is kind of your ministry. You are giving people hope. You're giving them confidence. You're giving them a new outlook on an otherwise crappy situation, right? Because most people with limb loss or limb difference, it's not just something that they are happy to acquire, right? Like yours came from osteosarcoma. We've had other guests that, like I said earlier, have lost it because of a traumatic automobile accident or congenitally. We have all different origin stories, and we kind of, make lemon out of lemonade. And I mean, yours is not just lemon out of lemonade. I mean, yours is like a lemonade shake mixed with all the goodness, man, that just really gives people the confidence. And let's now talk about kind of how your process is, because at the very end, we're going to do an official grand reveal of the leg that you made for me.
So my process is a little different every time because again, they ask for something specific. It usually involves me having to learn a new skill or work with a material I'm not familiar with, which I love because again, you guys leveled me up. Like every time you guys ask for something I don't know how to do, it's like, I don't know, we'll figure it out. And then at the end of it, I'll know how to do it for the next person. So it's like every project is just a big level up, and I love it. But yours, you gave me a stock cover, which is what Alex did too, which is rad because it's like I usually got to try to figure out how I'm going to make this thing fit, and it's a little different every time, because everybody's on a little different knee or foot combination or whatever. So with yours, it's just bread and butter, baby. I can just draw on what I want in a 2-dimensional plane. Literally, just I covered yours in masking tape. I drew on what I thought looked good. I peeled the masking tape off just like a seamstress template for like a dress. And then I cut it into little pieces. So now I have a 2-dimensional version of a bunch of objects that I then translate to different materials that I hand cut, and then I glue the puzzle back together in 3-dimensional. So you take a 3-dimensional thing, draw it 2-dimensional, then make it 3-dimensional again, make a puzzle and disassemble it, then put it back together, paint it, and make it look real. That's pretty much the process, man.
So, when we originally recorded this, I had just received it in the mail and I hadn't opened it up, and we did a whole unboxing, and unfortunately we didn't capture that moment. But now having it for a full week, since you first sent it to me, I've had the luxury of wearing it to the clinics because I work with the VA hospital, and I also am a certified peer visitor with the Amputee Coalition. So I get to visit amputees now who have just had their surgery, and that's something that is so rewarding. And I had my very first patient earlier this week, and so when his mother and sister and grandmother were all there in the room, and he looked down and got to see my leg that you created, like it just gave him so much excitement. It didn't just seem like it was this medicinal, boring, durable piece of medical equipment that was going to aid his mobility. It was like, no, it opened up the possibility of having that conversation piece, having that confidence. And man, like to me, that's what it's all about. And when we were kind of brainstorming of what I wanted, one of my favorite actors is Matthew McConaughey. So I'm like, okay, how can I get a piece of McConaughey on the leg that you created? And naturally, I thought of his movie Interstellar. So for those of you who haven't seen it, it's that kind of futuristic space movie. So he has this really gnarly space suit. So I sent Nick a picture of that. And then the second one was really nostalgic because one of my favorite movies as a little boy was, and I didn't even know it was Disney, but it's actually a Disney movie, The Rocketeer. And so that takes place, I think, in like the 1940s or so, 30s or 40s or so. And this character has this really awesome jetpack that's like a little rocket, hence the name Rocketeer. And his helmet's awesome, and his jumpsuit and the jetpack itself, like to me, that just sparks so much nostalgia and like positive childhood memories. And so when little kids have called it a robot leg, I'm like, how can we kind of make it look like a robot leg meets this spacesuit? Because I'm from Houston, that's the space city. matched with this favorite Disney movie of mine. And Nick, I tell you, he pulled it all together. So before I do the grand reveal, maybe tell us about kind of the process if I'm a new patient and I've reached out to you on Instagram or another way of how can we kind of go through that creative process for you to kind of help create a 100% custom and unique prosthetic cover for them.
Well, again, man, thank you for sharing that with me, dude. That right there is my pain, man. Hearing somebody say like what it's done, like how it changes the way they interact with people in the world because it empowers you to take control of the conversation, the narrative, and it's no longer all somber. How'd you lose your leg? It's like, dude, where'd you get that? That's awesome.
Yep.
Thank you. And so that's my payment. But the very first thing when people reach out to me, I say just one, thank you. Because it's never not flattering to have somebody ask you to do something for them. Like, and then two, if you're in a position, if somebody's asking you to do something for them, you're there for that's the answer is yes, do it. You know, that's why you're there. But reach out. The first thing I ask for is patience. Things take time. They're done by hand.
Patience with the CE, not the TS. He's got plenty of patience reaching out to him, but patience in the process. Yeah.
Yes, I am going as fast as I can to meet all the orders, but they are piling up faster than I can get to them, and it's going to require me to revamp my whole approach to this. But reach out, let me know what you're looking for. If you don't have something specific in mind, I speak fluent movie quotes, things like that. Like I'll get you if you're talking. It's from this movie. I'm like, yeah, I got it. But if you don't have something specific in mind, I find that 3 adjectives is a really good way to kind of let me get into your head. If you say like, I want a red, sleek, futuristic, I'm like, that's enough. That's enough, you know. 3 adjectives is a really good metric, I guess, for me to kind of figure out what people are going for aesthetically. And then from there, it's okay, are you a BK, AK? You know, if you're an AK, what kind of knee are you on? What kind of foot are you on? If you're a BK, do you have anybody that can cast you? We're trying to figure out a way to send 3D scans virtually so I can just get them and then have them, but I'm a ways away from that, man. Like, yeah, this is all stuff I do in between my day. Like, I'm still just regular teching it, busy making legs, but while plaster's in the oven or plaster is hardening up or I got plastic in the oven, this is just what I do in between.
So ladies and gentlemen, he is always working. And matter of fact, I was super impressed with the process of our interaction because, you know, I had a stock Oster cover, sent that to him, and that made it a lot easier. But he was able to build mine in the process of him moving and going through all that in his new house and all that. And he knew I had somewhat of kind of a needy deadline because as a lot of you are aware, I'm going to be climbing Mount Cayambe, a 19,000 foot glacier in Ecuador at the end of September. And I just wanted something unique there because there's going to be a lot of camera crews and photographers there. And honestly, I really didn't want to give any free product placement to a certain manufacturer who will remain nameless because, you know, I believe that when you go through something, we're not here to manipulate patients to use for free marketing, right? Like I lost my leg. It's my individual journey. And Nick was able to masterpiece something together that gave me that sense of identity and confidence. And again, allows me to tell my story to a younger audience and even like older people. Like I said, in the VA, I've had so many veterans come up to me when I was walking through and like, I've never seen one like that before. I'm like, yeah, because this is one of a kind. And so, you know, this is God's gift to Nick, and Nick is giving this to the community. So I just want to show a moment of gratitude for what you're doing, Nick. I mean, you are changing lives. I know it just may seem like, oh, it's just a prosthetic cover, but things that we do on the exterior oftentimes mimic how we feel on the interior. And that's what you're doing, man. You're making something badass to make people feel badass. And that's the first time I've cursed on this podcast. Lord, forgive me. But right now, with our final 3.5 minutes, I am going to unveil officially the leg that Nick created for me. Nick, did you have a name for it?
I think no, I didn't. I call it in my head the Rocketeer leg because that's what I drew the most elements from, just because size.
Yeah.
Like I need, you know, when I was looking at the Interstellar costume, I'm like, there's elements I can take, but like I need a body, dude.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the rocket was like such a perfect body. I just had to skew the proportions a little.
Well, we'll call this officially the Rocket Cam. Ladies and gentlemen, here we are. I wish I had that. What's the Stanley Kubrick film? Space Odyssey, whatever. You know what I'm talking about?
2001.
Yeah, Space Odyssey. The dun 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 dun.
Yeah.
I mean, look at the detail from the back of it to the front of it. And this is probably one of my favorite parts. It's like little ventilation here because that reminds me so much of the jetpack on Rocketeer. And y'all, it's super easy to don and doff. So to put on and take off, literally because the cover I had was Velcro, he was able to take the Velcro strip and even make that look awesome and just comes right off. And what looks like something that's like stainless steel, this is just foam with all the other little elements he's added to it. So here you have it, ladies and gentlemen, my very own Rocket Cam rocket leg. And Nick, we have about less than 2 minutes left. So what would you like to, we made great timing this time, and hopefully this records. So how would you like to conclude this episode with any words of encouragement to an individual who is undergoing limb loss?
Just know where you're at in the timeline. Don't think of now is forever. You know what I mean? I've been speaking with a gentleman who's 50 years old, and he's like, oh, I lost my leg at 50 and I don't know how I'm gonna do it. I'm like, wait, so that means you got to walk comfortably for 50 years? Man, you can't be anything but happy about that. Like, can't be mad, you know? Now you got to figure it out, but you're still young enough to get after it. But just know that he's 50. At some point, he'll be a 70-year-old who's had 20 years of being an amputee, and it'll be just like putting on his shoes. It becomes not a big deal over time if you allow it and you do the work. Do the work, man.
Yep.
Do the work.
Put in the work. I love Nick's attitude from age 13, getting that osteosarcoma diagnosis, to losing his leg at 27, to now walking in purpose as a prosthetic technician and the official artificial legs. Thank you so much, Nick, for joining us. I can't wait to share this with our audience. We'll put his Instagram link in the bio, and please remember to hit that subscribe button and follow us at official above and below. Thank you guys for joining. We'll see y'all next time.